What is going on, my fellow movie nerds and geeks alike? Today, I was just hoping to talk to you guys about back-to-school horrors. Now, I did a video over the summer just talking about like a watch list for films that I generally watch in the summertime, so I think it would be a fun time to do one in regards to having the back-to-school blues, like some brutal horror slashers that take place during the back-to-school time, or just dealing with school in general. Now, these are just movies that I would tend to watch around this time. There are going to be a lot of glaring omissions, I'm sure. So these are just movies I came up with that I'd add to this list. Movies I have in my collection that I wanted to just quick talk about and say why I would want to watch them around this time of year. There's going to be some more that maybe some of you guys would add to this list that I didn't. So like I said, this is just my opinion, and you could feel free to sound off in the comments some I might have missed, some that maybe I put on this that you wouldn't. So without further ado, let's get to the back to school horrors list. Pieces. Now this is just one of the greatest slashers of all time, Spanish horror movie, dealing with kids in college where all of a sudden someone is hacking up student bodies and just making a human puzzle out of them. This is one of my favorite slasher movies of all time, and the fact that it deals with like college students is why I would add it to my back to school horrors list. You don't need to go to Texas for a chainsaw massacre. Monster Squad. I mean, this is a no-brainer. This is just an all-time classic horror, kiddie horror, gateway horror film for many people. It deals with these young kids that have this like club called the Monster Squad, and like in school and all that, they gather all their friends and they talk monster movies, and eventually Dracula comes and brings all the famous Universal monsters, and they have to do battle with them before they get this amulet and take over the world. It's a classic, man, Monster Squad, and it deals with little kids still in school. If you haven't seen Monster Squad, I don't know what to tell you. Slaughter High. Now this one deals with like more of a reunion of kids who used to be in school, but at the start of the film it deals with like a bunch of kids bullying a kid to the degree that he becomes horribly maimed, and then years later he invites them all back to the school for a reunion so he can slaughter them all. This is one of my favorite underseen slasher movies of all time. And because it deals with school themes and a high school reunion, I had to throw it on this list. Christine. Now, this is an all-time John Carpenter classic, written by Stephen King, of course. It deals with Arnie getting an old 1958 Plymouth that is, God, just iconic in the horror genre. And it deals with him, like, in school, dealing with bullies, and his buddy playing football, so you know it's kind of the fall, start of the school season. And that's why I'd add it on this list, you know? It's got a lot of school elements, and come on, man, Christine is an all-timer. It Follows. Now, this is one of the greatest horror movies of the last 10 years, in my honest opinion. And the only reason I'd really throw this one on the list is because you get that iconic scene where Micah Monroe is sitting in her college class and she sees that old woman following her, coming towards her. That's really it, but It Follows is a classic and you should just see it regardless of it being back to school time. Brain Scan. This is another underseen gem, man. Stars Edward Furlong of Terminator 2 fame, Frank Langella. This one deals with a kid who comes across this game called Brain Scan, and it makes you a serial killer, and you have to kill people and cover up your clues, and it turns out that it's actually happening in real life, and he's accidentally killing his neighbors and his friends and all that. And then the twist at the end is that, no, it was actually just the game. But this is an all-timer, and why I put it on this list is because Edward Furlong and his buddy are in school and they have the horror club, and there's that famous line where Edward Furlong's talking to the principal and he's like, "What were you playing when we caught you in there?" And he goes, "Death, death, death. Part 2." So that's the reason I'd add it to this list. There's some high school elements in here. Cooties. This is like a newer horror movie that's more horror comedy than anything, but it deals with Elijah Wood's character as a substitute teacher coming into this school to teach all the young kids, but what he doesn't know is that all the chicken nuggets have been infected with this like green goo that turns them into blood, flesh-eating monsters, and all the kids are just like these zombies running around killing all the staff and all the people surrounding the school. You got Rainn Wilson from The Office in here. This is just like kind of like a goofy, schlocky, slapstick comedy more than a horror movie, but it deals with the school, and it's honestly just an entertaining time. I'll talk about these two together. You got Fright Night and Fright Night 2. Obviously, with Fright Night, they're high school students dealing with the vampire that lives next door. And then in Fright Night Part 2, they're in college, same deal, trying to stop this vampire from taking over the world. And dude, Fright Night is, in my opinion, the greatest vampire movie of all time. Fright Night 2, God, why doesn't this have a fucking real release yet? Just a great sequel. And yeah, man, just dealing with the school elements alongside a vampire flick is why I threw it on this list. I'll talk about these two together as well. You have the It miniseries and you have It Chapter 1. This deals with young kids, and there's some like scenes in here where like Pennywise, the killer clown, is chasing kids through the school library and all these things. But, I mean, these are iconic films, and because it deals with young kids, specifically in the beginning of the It miniseries and, of course, Chapter 1 in the new It movies, is why I'd throw it on my back-to-school list, because of the school elements involved. Donnie Darko. Now, this isn't really a horror movie, but I consider it kind of horror-adjacent, dealing with, like, the time travel themes and people dying and all that. But because it takes place in a high school and you get those iconic scenes with the fear scale and all that, and like They Made Me Do It, and like the bathroom scenes and all that, and Drew Barrymore's character being Donnie's teacher, I mean, I'd be remiss to not include it on this list. Donnie Darko, it is a cult classic. Everyone's seen it at this point, and just one of the weirdest, most bizarre movies you'll really ever see. 3 of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Of course, you have the original. I mean, there's that iconic scene, no running in the hallways, where Freddy is stalking Heather Langenkamp's character, and come on, Nightmare on Elm Street's an all-timer. And of course, in Part 2, you have that iconic scene where they're in, like, gym class, and then, like, the teacher turns out to be going to, like, these crazy gay nightclubs, and he gets, like, whipped in the showers. So yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street 2 also has those high school themes. And then, of course, the Dream Master, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, you get that amazing scene, learning is fun with Freddy, and they're taking the test, and the girl is just sitting there, and Freddy comes up to her, and he goes, "You wanna suck face?" And just sucks her soul out of her body, and she's just like, "You flunk." Heathers. Now, Heathers is another one like Donnie Darko that's not really horror, but it's kind of horror adjacent, dealing with Winona Ryder and Christian Slater killing off a bunch of their classmates and making it look like suicides. It is just an iconic film, and it deals with high school drama and high school death, so I wanted to add it to this list. Now, in that same vein of Heathers, you have Jennifer's Body, where it's like a band comes to town, and in order for them to get famous, they sacrifice Megan Fox's character, and demonic possession incurs on Megan Fox, and she comes back and starts eating all the boys in her school. You get Kyle Gallner in here, goth boy, and Amanda Seyfried. This is like a newer horror movie that like really stuck with me, and it's just super cool, and having Megan Fox be this like demonic succubus type character walking around high school killing people is just a lot of fun, and something you don't really see every day. And if that song, "Through the Trees," doesn't get stuck in your brain, dude, oh my god. I'll sing it for a week every time I watch it. Idle Hands. Now, this is more of like a Halloween high school movie, I'd say, but it deals with like Devon Sawa's hand getting possessed by like this killer, and he just ends up killing everyone around him. It's more of a horror comedy, and I just wanted to throw it on this list more as like a mention because it deals more in like Halloween realm, because there's that Halloween dance at the end, but it deals with high school students and like people being slaughtered in a gymnasium towards the end. So yeah, man, Idle Hands. The Slumber Party Massacre. Now, more towards the original, of course. Deals with like this driller killer who is an escaped mental patient going around with this like electric drill and killing all these like young girls as they're having slumber parties. But there's this iconic scene where like he is chasing this one girl around like a locker room, and he's just like hunting her down and kills her in like the showers and all that, and it's just a lot of fun. The original Slumber Party Massacre is like a slasher classic. The sequels are a little goofy, but I mean, I had to add the original to this list. Class of Nukem High. Now, this, of course, is a trauma film. I like this one a lot because it's more in tone with, like, the Toxic Avenger and the goofiness. It's not, like, a musical or anything crazy like that. But this deals directly with, like, a toxic spill, and these kids start getting, like, turning into these like monsters because they're come in contact with it, and it's like a creature feature of sorts taking place in this high school, Nukem High, and it's just like cool, like almost Mad Maxy meets Toxic Avenger type punker movie. It is just so much fun, and it's not really horror, but it is like kind of an exploitation film that takes place in a high school, so I had to add it to this list. Child's Play 2. You know, the killer Chucky doll has kind of seen better days, you know what I mean? They are beating this into the ground with how many fucking TV shows and terrible sequels that keep coming out with this. But the reason I wanted to add this one to the list is because there's that iconic scene where Chucky is coming out of the closet after the teacher, and he's just like beating her with a ruler. He pumps her up with like the basketball like air pump, and he's just like, "You've been very naughty, Miss Kettlewell." Just like a really iconic scene from this franchise, and yeah, Child's Play 2, man. Now another one that's kind of like not really back to schooly, but Ginger Snaps, man. It's the werewolf movie where, of course, Catherine Isabel gets accidentally bitten by a werewolf and she's turning into a werewolf, and there's that iconic scene in the hallway where she's hunting down the janitor, kills a bunch of kids in her class. This one's more Halloween oriented, of course, because you get that big party where everyone's dressed up for Halloween, but it takes place in high school, so I just wanted to mention it here. Prom Night. Now this is another one that's not really back to school because prom typically takes place at the end of a school year, but just a classic slasher movie. Leslie Nielsen, Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, where slashers hunting down co-eds during prom night. And this movie hasn't really aged well for me. It's not that great, but I'd be remiss not to mention it if I'm talking about high school horrors, man. Now another one that's not really like school related, but I'd be remiss not to at least mention it. Suspiria obviously deals with witches, and it's like almost like a giallo-esque type movie at a dance academy, so it is kind of like a back-to-school sort of situation, but God, this is one of the most beautiful films of all time. It's at least visually, and like the sound design, everything. One of my favorite movies of all time, and the remake ain't too bad either. You know, it's tonally different as hell from the original, but same deal. A dance academy, and you know, it's kind of school adjacent, kind of back to schooly. And in that same realm you have Inferno, which is a spiritual successor to Suspiria, a college-esque scene where like they're all sitting in the auditorium listening to the professor speak, and you get that zoom in on that girl's eyes. Not really school related, but Inferno, another beautiful film by Argento. You have Carrie, the iconic De Palma film where Sissy Spacek, of course, telekinetic powers, and she just burns her high school to the ground during prom night. And now this isn't really back to school because it's dealing with prom elements, but one of the all-time greatest horror films of all time, written by Stephen King, of course, and just wanted to mention it because of the school elements, but because it's prom, it's not really back to school, but Carrie, dude, it's an all-timer. If you haven't seen it, obviously check out Carrie. The House of the Devil. Now, the beginning of this film, you see the girl at her college dorm, I guess, when she takes the babysitting job, and she eventually finds out that this house is being run by a bunch of like cultists, Satanists, whatever. It is just like a creepy, slow burn horror movie from Ty West, of course. I wanted to mention it just because of the beginning scene, but if you like moody, atmospheric, slow burn horror, look no further than The House of the Devil. Now, Halloween, you of course have to mention just because of the beginning scenes. They're all in school, of course, and even like poor young Tommy Doyle getting his pumpkin smashed by Lonnie. The only reason I really wouldn't put it on this list is because it, of course, is a Halloween film, so you know it's taking place during Halloween. But I just wanted to mention it because it, of course, has those school elements. And, of course, Scream. Now, you could really say, like, Scream, Scream 2, Scream 4, Scream 5, and Scream 6 all deal with, like, school, back-to-school kind of elements there. The only one that doesn't is Scream 3. But, of course, you have, like, the Ghostface Killer stalking Sidney Prescott in almost every single one except the 6th one. But it's always, like, involving, like, whether it be Woodsboro High or, like, the college or, like, Blackmore in the later films. It is dealing with school directly with the killer stalking all the characters in these films. Now, it's not really school related, but, I mean, you'd be remiss not to talk about it if you're talking back-to-school horrors, right? Just because of, God, a bunch of people getting stalked and killed as their students. And The Faculty. God, one of my favorite 90s horror movies of all time. Robert Rodriguez with this iconic cast. This movie these days plays more like a Tommy Hilfiger commercial to me. Bruh. But I do love it. I love the grungy late 90s soundtrack that they got going on. Elijah Wood, Josh Hartnett, I mean, Usher, for God's sakes. This is an all-time classic for me. It, of course, deals with aliens coming down and taking over the school and the town, and specifically targeting the faculty of their school, and then the faculty is just these walking alien creatures that are turning everyone in their town into these weird, almost like Lovecraftian kind of aliens. And God, I mean, this deals directly with the school and the faculty, of course, so, I mean, the faculty is, to me, one of the biggest back-to-school horrors of all time. And probably my favorite back-to-school horror movie of all time, Ghoulies 3, Ghoulies Go to College. Now, this is more of like a horror comedy. Again, they, of course, talk in this one, which they didn't in any of the other ones. They go and, like, get involved in this prank war, and they're drinking beer and, like, looking at girls' boobs and stuff the whole time. It is so funny and amazing. I mean, Ghoulies 2 may be my favorite, but, like, Ghoulies 3 for comedic value is almost unmatched. And them dealing with, like, fraternity antics and just, like, chugging all the beer and stuff. Oh my God, it's so funny. I had heard rumblings that maybe the Vestron video line that they have going on was going to get this one for Blu-ray. God, I hope so, because I only have it on VHS and like a big group DVD of sorts. But Ghoulies Go to College, man. To me, this is my favorite back-to-school horror, kind of next to The Faculty, and I'd be remiss not to mention it. Please, let's get this one on physical media soon, please! Alright guys, so that was my list of back-to-school horrors. There are so many that I can just even mention here that I didn't include in my list. You got Class of 1984, you got Class of 1999, Teaching Mrs. Tingle, you got Cutting Class. I mean, you could also mention maybe Summer School because it's dealing with school, but I mean, it's dealing with summertime, you know, so it's not back-to-school time. Anyway guys, that was my list. I know there are so many more. I mean, even sequels of some of these movies I mentioned, like Prom Night 2, any of the other prom nights you can mention. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed my list. Let me know what you think of my choices down below in the comments, and let me know anything that I missed. There are going to be so many. So like I said, this is just my opinion, my list, what I have, what I would watch for back-to-school horrors, if you will. Thank you so much for always watching these dumb, silly videos. Until the next video, guys, thank you again so much. I love you all. Adios.